Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever meeting of energy freedom in the English language. The times that we are living now demand and request special attitudes and special means. So we are addressing not only the Ukrainian energy community, but the energy community the world over. And we have a distinguished panel of speakers today to talk about sanctions against Russia and what is the new role of the Ukrainian economy. We will talk about the impact of the US and EU sanctions on the Russian economy, how to strengthen sanctions pressure, also about the energy breach between Ukraine and EU countries, nuclear safety on the European continent, and the investment opportunities in the energy sector of Ukraine, for example, in oil production and refining investment projects. This meeting is being live streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And seeing that and knowing that our participants, our speakers, have plenty of things on their hands, I ask you to limit your interventions to probably 7-8 minutes, because anyway, the surveys show that this is the threshold of listeners' and viewers' attention. You have, those who watch us have an opportunity to ask questions via chat and also via comments function on YouTube and Facebook. You may also ask them in Ukrainian or Russian. We will translate them for the sake of the rest of our viewers. And the first person to start, I invite Mr. Oleksiy Ryabchin, who is now the advisor to the chairman of Naftogaz, the Ukrainian national company, on the development of the low carbon sector. Mr. Ryabchin, go ahead.
Dear colleagues, dear listeners or watchers, dear distinguished panelists, it's an honor to open such a great discussion, and happy that the Energy Club doing it in English, because what I see now, that there is a high demand from the information from Ukraine, basically, which sends signal to world economies to solve the issues related to Russia-Ukrainian war. Basically, like myself personally and like my colleagues in Naftogaz, receive huge amount of requests in order to have our opinion be spread to the decision makers, to influence, and Ukrainian voices are now really heard, and we are from people who were subject to the international politics and policy, now object to the international policy. Now we are a subject of international policy and politics, and we are the influencers to many processes. And as the time limit for 7 minutes, I will start, we have two topics, like sanctions and new economy. And as regard to sanctions, I guess all of you already read the proposition from the working group called Makfol-Yermak Working Group on International Sanction. And their draft of the paper, or white paper, has been issued. It's already available on the Atlantic Council website, at Stanford, at administration, at Office of the President, where a huge amount of prominent and decent experts and professionals drafted their proposition of numerous sanctions for different sectors, which might affect Russian economy greatly and led to the faster stoppage of this war. Our CEO Yuri Vitrenko has been actively participating in this working group with the propositions, and it's really interesting that the first chapter of this document is related to the sanctions on the oil and gas, so basically on an energy sector of Russia. I would not repeat or read out every single point from this document. I guess it's rather complete, and definitely it comprehends with all of the ideas that we are lobbying for the international community. Several of the most prominent things that will definitely affect Russian economy are the sanctions on Russian oil. So the embargo that is now being discussed on the sixth sanction package by the European Union, and the signals that we receive from the international media, from our partners, that the oil embargo is apparently the one that might be, let's say not would be, might be implemented. Of course, there are a lot of resistance from different member states. I will not be afraid to mention Hungary, which we understand why. Also, there are some opposition from Germany, but I guess as a compromise, there will be the oil embargo, the same like with the coal embargo that was already been implemented to Russia. So with the postponing of the coal embargo till the August, it was a proposition by Germany for them to be able to, fulfill some contracts or to buy some reserves of coal for them before the embargo will be in place. It's a shame, of course, but it's better than nothing. Same might be with oil, although we demand the immediate ban on oil, gas, and coal. But we do hope that the European Union will impose it without any trigger. So recently, it was some kind of a Bucha massacre was a trigger to implement the package of sanction, or Kramatorsk. Airstrike was the trigger. So we do hope that the West do not need any triggers at all to implement more sophisticated sanctions, because it's a really shame when we receive an international aid, military one, for 1.52 billion euros, and Russia for their contracts receive already up to, from different estimation, from 40 to 50 billion for the energy trade. So this basically, makes the sanctions that already been in place not so effective. And we see how Putin is trying to communicate with their own population, saying everything is okay, our economy is doing great, sanction is not hurting us. But then we listen to the head of the central bank, which sends a signal that soon it will be really the different way. So if you read, between the line and speak and read the document and the analysis, you understand that Russia have some reserves, and they are now burning these reserves to support the currency, to trigger inflation, to do the social payment. But we do understand that the faster the reserves will be burned out, the better for Ukraine. Also, there were very numerous interesting propositions in regard to some taxation or an escrow account. I will explain it to those who don't know that the escrow account is like basically targeting the gas sector. We do understand that the gas is the most difficult commodity to to place an embargo, to sanction. But like if Germany, for example, is still buying the Russian gas, so the escrow account is some kind of intermediate account, so deposit account that they pay, and the money is not delivered to Russia directly to fund their economy, but this money goes to fund to some special account, and it's conditioned to the end of the war and withdrawal of the troops. So basically, the Western countries still consume Russian gas, but the money not goes directly there. Also, there are numerous propositions to impose some duties, which will make these commodities more expensive, and the duty might go to some, Ukraine recovery fund. There are numerous of these propositions, so I do highly recommend for those energy experts and just professionals who are listening to us or who will be listening to the record to read this document and to pressure on your government, to pressure on your business to fulfill and implement these sanctions. As for the green recovery, I would put it that way, of the economy. Andriy, you would like to say something?
Yeah, Mr. Upton, I think that you're approaching the time limit, and as some of our speakers are hard pressed on time, I would like to make a pause in your presentation, but then I will give you the opportunity to finish it, okay?
Okay, green economy will be the second topic we will discuss after the sanctions. So to finish up, we're in Naftogaz, all of our team, our international team, our management board are heavily involved in numerous international conversations to pressure the foreign government, to persuade them to do the sanction. And although it might affect the transit, which is one of the business of Naftogaz, we do completely understand this. And like, it's a shame also for us that we need to fulfill this obligation to ship gas to the European Union, and we could sacrifice this. If it will be a full embargo, we will be able to deal with this, but like the war will be stopped. Full stop here.
Thank you very much, and I will keep my promise, and Mr. Upton will get some time after the general messages that we'll hear from our next speakers. And the next speaker is Dmytro Sakharuk. He is the executive director of DTEC, and this is a major player on the Ukrainian energy market. Mr. Sakharuk, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all participants, to all our listeners and to viewers. So today we are talking about sanctions. I think that Russia right now is the leading country in terms of number of sanctions that are imposed on it by the world. And I think this is not a surprise, because this is not a sanctions against Russia, it's against devil that they are doing in our country, and basically creating this threat to the whole of the world. But sanctions, I think, are not complete, because right now the important part is missing. So oil embargo that we discussed, oil and gas embargo, because oil money is the biggest revenue stream for Russia. If we combine all money together that coming to Russia from gas, oil, and coal, so it will be $1 billion per day. This is a huge number. So it's basically almost $350 billion per year. And the sixth package that was mentioned before, that right now it's considered, would be very weak if it would not contain the oil embargo. This is a must in order to significantly influence the Russian revenue coming from energy. We as a company, together with some other big players on the market, mainly with Naftogaz and with Ukrenergo, decided to help to decrease this revenue stream. And we initiated a project called Stop Bloody Energy. This is a site where you can find all companies that are working in energy sector with Russia, starting from energy traders, gas traders, coal traders, finishing with companies that support producing oil and gas, like machinery providers, software providers, etc. Because embargo imposed by the state is important, but implementation of this embargo will be will depends on many market players that would need to really stop trading Russian oil and gas, because sometimes we see right now, even after the declaration from some companies that they would stop trading with Russia, they're trying to find very creative way to continue working with Russia. That's why we believe that the pressure, not only the government, but also on the private sector, is necessary. And we have some results. Some companies that were initially included in the list trading, which were trading with Russia, after being in the list, they stopped doing that. Some Japanese companies, some European companies, they canceled doing business with Russia after they included into the list in our project. I hope that we are continue searching for new companies. We are adding new companies, and I would be very happy if the number of companies would be decreasing in the list, and we would stop this project when all companies stop doing business with Russia. But sanctions create a big problem for Euro, for example, our biggest trading partner right now. And I think that in addition to just asking for sanctions, Ukraine could suggest something instead of that. And this addition, that could be energy that could come from Ukraine to Europe. In March 16th, Ukrainian energy system were synchronized with the European one. And for more than a month, we are working together as a big energy system, starting from Portugal, Spain, finishing with Ukrainian energy system. And we are working okay. We keep frequency. We are very good from technical point of view, and that create a very good basis for starting exporting energy to Europe in order to substitute Russian oil, gas, and coal. Right now, we have a proficit of energy because of the decline in the consumption, and we can sell energy to Europe, helping them to do the switch from Russian energy to other sources. First, the steps were done. It's a small volume of energy that Ukraine export to Poland, up to 200 megawatt. And another 600, 800 can be opened pretty soon. And I think that will be a very good contribution from Ukrainian point of view to this European and cooperation between Europe and Ukraine. Also gas. Right now we are importing gas, but if we as a country invest into our domestic production, having a very good reserve base of natural gas, in 3-5 years, we can export gas to Europe, helping again to switch Europe from Russian gas to other sources. Coal, another source of help or support from Ukraine. Again, we have a seasonal proficit in Ukraine. We can export coal to Poland and to other European countries again to substitute Russian coal. So that effects create a very good combination of European and Ukrainian economy. And we are not just asking for sanctions to stop the war from by Russian Federation, but we're also suggesting something instead. We are helping Europe to switch the energy sources, to help to cover their needs. And I think that's a very, very good combination of interests of Europe and Ukraine. And we as market players, as the energy companies of Ukraine, can definitely contribute into the strengthening of those connections between European companies and European business and Ukrainian business. And I think that can be a very good start for recovery of Ukrainian economy after the war, after our victory, because the investments and recovery plan that will definitely start being implemented after the victory will be based on the existent economical relationship between the parties. And more we have during the war, more we create during war, would for us would be easier to recover after, to rebuild the country after our victory.
Thank you, Mr. Sakharuk. You managed to match Mr. Rabchin's opening remarks in clarity and determination. And it's time to invite another speaker. I see that Michael Grossman, managing partner at Tumbleweed Partners, has joined us. If you hear me, Mr. Grossman, then the floor is yours. No, there's a strange sign designated Mr. Grossman, but we have no lack of distinguished. Oh, yes, Mr. Grossman.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so I will strive to give a more European perspective on these questions. On the question of European sanctions against Russian oil and gas export. Well, first of all, I'm from France, and yesterday evening we had a debate between the two presidential candidates on TV, like every 5 years. And so the topics were set by the speakers, and there was, of course, on the agenda, the question of Ukraine was one of the mandatory questions, but also the question of the purchasing power and inflation. So it is the question of how to sanction Russia. As horrible as Russia's crimes in Ukraine are, have always need to be counterbalanced against let's say, purely social and economical questions that this entails. So what is important is to optimize these sanctions for maximal effect on the Russian economy and minimal self-harm on the European economy. You probably noted that yesterday the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany said that her country would go without oil imports from Russia by the end of 2022, and then that she would take care of gas. So she said this in a visit to the Baltic states, but she didn't say, unfortunately, how she would do that. And her announcement also went against calls by other ministers to not to boycott Russian hydrocarbon exports because of economic reasons. So it is very much a balancing act, and if one has to prioritize boycotting oil or gas, 1 year ago I would have said, first of all, boycott oil and products and then gas. But at the prices at which gas is right now, it makes more sense to do the opposite. 1 year ago, one unit of energy of oil would cost 2.2 times more than a unit of energy of gas, whereas now the ratio is 0.6. if you look at the TTF as the price proxy. So, so the question really is, how can Europe decrease progressively its dependence on Russian gas? And and that's not easy because Russia accounted for 45% of gas imports last year. Some of it, most of it is obviously by pipeline, but there's also about so like that's 140 BCM by pipe and 15 by as LNG. So of course, some people have been hoping for U.S. LNG to come to the rescue. So U.S. LNG represents 22 BCM in 2021. But if I were to make a policy recommendation to the European Commission, it would be not to only rely on Europe's currently high gas prices to ensure that U.S. or non-Russian LNG flows to Europe. It's also important to have long-term contracts to guarantee the supply, just like Japan has such long-term contracts to guarantee its security of supply. Of course, that entails sometimes higher prices than spot market prices, but this is the price to pay. Otherwise, we cannot expect to have diversity of supply and always the best price. Now, this also raises the question of infrastructure and how can one get more LNG, no matter what origin, into Europe is also not an easy question. Traditionally, Europe's LNG terminals have been underutilized, and most of the capacity was on the Atlantic Ocean side of Europe. So, in decreasing order of capacity, you have Spain, the UK, and then France. And so these are the countries that have the most import capacity. Spain has about 43, I think, and BCM per year. And these countries are also the ones that naturally saw the greatest increase in LNG imports recently due to high prices in Europe. This is due to really due to the relatively high prices of gas in Europe, and not so much because of an economic, let's say, increase in economic activity. Hello?
Yes,
can you hear me, by the way?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry. Now, the question is, where could additional supplies be coming from? Well, first of all, regarding terminals, it's also important to bear in mind that if you want to build more terminals, as Germany says it wants to do in Wilhelmshaven, as some kind of a to replace Nord Stream 2, it takes a long time. So I'm sorry to say that there's no quick solution to this. I know that in France, the second and most recent LNG terminal in Dunkirk, well, it was 3 years of studies and 5 years to build. And of course, in France is not like the United States. We don't have, or Europe in general. We don't. Let's say seaside real estate is the most in demand and the most environmentally sensitive, and building anything new is never easy. So 3 + 5 years to build, and that's after all the authorizations were granted. So the quickest, let's say, fix would be to have FSRUs, floating storage and regasification units, but that also takes time, and the whole world wants FSRUs right now. Regarding other, let's say, pipe supplies, of course, in decreasing order of importance for Europe, you have Norway, that's 113 BCM to Europe in 2021. They may increase a little bit by this year to 115 when they finish fixing the Hammerfest LNG, which was shut down because of a fire. So they expect to start it in May of 22 this year. After Norway, you have Egypt, which expects to export 7.5 million tons of LNG. So that's about 11 BCM, most of which will go to Europe because of contracts they have with the Italian firm Eni. So these are the main two, let's say, plus the United States. So that's three potential sources of additional supplies. The other ones, traditional suppliers, are Algeria and Nigeria, but both of these countries have limits to how much extra they can provide. Algeria because of internal problems. Well, both of them because of internal problems, underinvestment in both countries, and growing demand in both countries domestically. I mean, so Algeria, that's 55 BCM, and Nigeria, that's from 27 to 30 BCM as LNG. What else can I say? Yeah, there may also be relief on the demand side, but that's not because of policy or anything. It is because of China, because of slumping demand for gas in China, in part because of the high prices. So China is now reopening gas-fired power plants, despite its commitment to improving the local air quality. And also, and that's ironic, as you know, China has, for political reasons, tried to adhere to a zero COVID policy, and this now has the effect of, let's say, shutting down cities and therefore the economy. So this is a very political decision at a time when Xi Jinping wants to be re-elected for a third term. That would be the first time in Chinese history. So he needs to be shown to be in control of the country and therefore of the pandemic.
Mr. Grossman, thank you very much.
My time is up?
Yes,
okay.
Time is up, and I actually added some time because you were presenting a gamut of opportunities, and really made a very deep express analysis of what's going on. Next, I invite to speak Mr. Wojciech Jakubik. He's an energy analyst and the editor-in-chief of businessalert.pl. Go ahead, panie Wojciechu.
Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you very much. I'm an energy analyst indeed, and I'm also a journalist working in the energy sector. So I have some interesting news from today from Poland, because according to our Office of Oil Industry, that's the association of companies like Orlen, Lotos, and the biggest oil companies from Central Europe, it is possible to impose oil embargo without a heavy influence on fuel market. It is really important from the perspective of public support for what we are doing to help Ukraine, because as you all know, we have the energy crunch, we have a deepening economic crisis, and the record energy, gas, and fuel prices are one of the main factors when it comes to elections, when it comes to the pressure on decision makers. So according to the latest results of this oil association works, we are ready to impose oil embargo, and that would make the fuel prices in Poland increase for 1 zloty. For now, it's like 6 zlotys per liter of 90 of gasoline 95. So it's like 1.2 euro per liter. And if we impose this embargo immediately, it would make the price go up for 1 zloty. So it's up to 1.5 euro per liter. Of course, it is a negative impact on economy, because our Western economy is driven on low oil, fuel and electricity prices. The GDP depends on that, but it's not that much as it would be suggested, for example, by the Russian side, that we would have some economic apocalypse in Europe, like we would have some deep decrease in GDP. In fact, in long term, such oil embargo would increase the pace of becoming independent from Russian resources. It would increase the pace of energy transition, because even now we have the demand destruction trend. It is a trend that is showing that consumers, under the pressure of really expensive energy resources, they are already changing their behavior right now. We see a decreased demand for fuels in US. We will probably see the same trend inside the European Union. So when we discuss the embargo, which is fully supported by me and multiple energy analysts in Western Europe, if we think about embargo, it is already self-imposing right now. If you look at Russian oil imports, we can see that the main traders like Vitol or Trafigura, they are limiting imports of Russian fuel because they are afraid of sanctions, or maybe they do it because of moral reasons. We don't know, but the numbers are showing decreased interest in Russian resources. So if we take two things into this discussion, first is a great need to stop Russian military aggression in Ukraine on one hand. On the other hand, the limited consequences for our economy, and in long term, probably even positive consequences, like energy transition, like becoming fully independent from Russia quicker for good of our common economy, we get a result that we should impose this embargo, especially when it comes to oil. Right now, we can do it. We will pay the price, like 1 zloty more per liter of gasoline in Poland immediately, but we will achieve the results we are counting for. The other part of this discussion is the risk of adjusting Russian economy to sanctions environment. If they have enough time to provide some diversification of the markets, they will be able to limit the impact of embargo on their economy. So it is another argument to act fast, to make a decisive impact on Russian economy, and hopefully make them change their behavior, make them talk about some resolution of war in Ukraine. So from the perspective of effectiveness of what we do, of our common policy against Russia, it is also necessary to impose this embargo. And looking at the discussion inside the European Union, I cover it every day. We have positive signals from Poland, of course, but also from France. Emmanuel Macron, who is facing another elections, but still he is the president of France. He said he's for oil embargo. We hear statements from Germany that they are ready to quit Russian oil supplies until the end of the year. It's nothing new. They speak about it since the beginning. But if it was up to German public opinion, the polls show growing support for oil embargo also. So it is about limiting our prosperity for common good. It is a tough choice, tough decision, especially in times of economic crisis. But also from the economic perspective, prolonging war in Ukraine means a risk of fallen state on borders of NATO, of European Union. It is also an economic argument for quick decisions in this field. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie Wojciechu. And the opinion from Poland counts very much, especially as you are thinking beyond the borders of Poland. As for sacrificing well-being, well, I think that the Poles have demonstrated that they can survive the shock therapy, and you have enough experience in this.
Well, just one word. Let me say one thing, that actually the diversification policy is an officially European Union policy, but some countries did their homework, like Poland and Lithuania, and some countries didn't, like Germany, which supported Nord Stream 2 project to the very end. So now we have a brutal lesson for all of us.
Yeah, we understand this, and the more so we value the position of Poland, Lithuania, and other countries. Next to speak is Andriy Kulykov. He is a senior associate at the Cannon Institute and director of energy programs at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future.
Thanks, Andriy. Good afternoon to everyone who's participating or listening to us. Thanks for the invitation. So first of all, about sanctions, it's about two things. It's about stopping the war, and it's about fixing the mistakes that some European countries did during recent 2 decades. Because the economic situation and economic well-being is among the pillars of authoritarian regime and fueling the war, it's very important to have this sanctions is introduced as much deep as possible. Just a few numbers. So Russian energy exports and revenues last year amounted from oil $110 billion, oil products $68.5 billion, gas $62.8 billion, and coal 4.5. And these numbers about the revenues, these are about priorities in introducing sanctions. So in total, Russian energy exports last year amounted to $250 billion, comparing that in general, Russian export last year was 492. So energies were responsible for more than a half Russian exports last year. And according to some assessments, if sanctions are not, if no restrictions and no sanctions introduced this year, because of prices, Russian energy revenues could rise to $326 billion. That is 30% increase. Fortunately, we do have some restrictions in force already today. And we can see some drops in Russia's energy export and revenues, but still it's far from being enough to contain Russia. And here I'd like to quote High Representative Borrell, who said that European Union paid Russia for energy 30 times more, comparing to the amount of financial aid to Ukraine to battle with Russia. So it's clear that the current situation cannot solve the problem. Sure, I understand and agree the situation that for many European countries, it is impossible to refuse from Russian gas and oil immediately. But let's be frankly, that was the mistake of the European Union in general, the policy of the European Union, and some European countries who allowed the Union to be so deeply dependent on Russian energy. And today we can hear some German officials saying that it was so unwise to rely so much on Russia. But I'm so sorry, this doesn't help in solving the situation in general. So I understand that EU's dependence on Russian gas is so high that in some periods, volumes of Russian gas delivered to European Union were higher than capacity of LNG terminals. So this is a restriction because in some periods, about 50% of gas imported to the European Union came from Russia, but that there still is a chance to decrease Russian gas consumption as much as possible. And similar to oil. Coal is the cheapest, is the easiest resource to substitute because of no infrastructure bottlenecks. And in the case of bottlenecks, the most difficult situation is with gas. And as we saw that oil gives Russia and oil products the highest revenues among other energies. So I think this will not sound to be very popular, but I think that in the short term, postponing of coal and nuclear phase out in European Union could be very helpful in substituting Russian energy. So as we saw, if I'm not wrong, Belgium decided to postpone nuclear phase out for 10 years. UK decided to expand their nuclear capacities, and they increased the level of nuclear capacities usage right now. But unfortunately, we didn't hear such initiatives from Germany. So Germany, whose 3 nuclear power plants were decommissioned last year, and they are planning to decommission 3 more this year, don't want to take this step to decrease their dependency from Russian gas, unfortunately. Regarding some other impacts, yes, this will impact on energy prices in Europe. This will impact on gas prices, and gas rally will remain. But I have to remind once more that this rally partly was also caused by Gazprom's and Russia's actions. And I want to remind the situation of 2012 when in European Union we had a similar case of gas prices hike. That was much shorter in terms of time, and prices were not so high. But 10 years ago, we had the same rhetorics from Russia, who said that those were renewables responsible for gas prices spikes. The Russians demanded long-term contracts. So that was a mistake, and that wasn't unlearned lesson. And one more point, so it's better to pay higher prices for energy bills rather than pay with lives, faiths, and territories like Ukraine does now. Because clear that Baltic states are very concerned about the future of their countries in the case if Russia is not contained today. And the whole European Union, including the states who were great promoters of Russian energy in the European Union, have to be concerned with these states at the part of European Union as well. So I just have to say the final sentence that all mistakes that some European countries, some European decision makers did in recent 2 decades, which caused to such a deep dependence and reliance on Russia, these have to be fixed now, and sanctions should be introduced, and Russian energy should be substituted as much as possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andriy. This was brisk and very apt. And now we have a question from LinkedIn, which allows me to address it to Mr. Rapchin, who was promised 5 minutes anyway. And I ask Mr. Rapchin to also conclude your intervention with the final remarks regarding the entire conversation. So we have a question from Obialor Ikechukwu, sales analyst. He asks, what about investments in renewables? They seem to be a good way to ensure security and environmental stability. Mr. Rapchin, The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is exactly what I would like to stress. Like during the first months of the war, like there was no like even thought about green energy or the the aspect that I dedicated like basically my life and my professional career. But I would say like in like these 2 weeks, especially after the liberation of Kiev, like me personally and like our team has been reached by numerous mayors, numerous businessmen that were preparing lots of projects before the war, and they reached and said like what you thought about this. Also, we are like initiated a huge amount of discussion with our European and yes, colleagues regard the purchase of gas to the next heating season in Naftogaz to to secure the gas supply for the next heating season. And while we are having the high level conversation, we also are in the green recovery or some other like green business activity topic into our conversation with the policymakers and bureaucrats and businessmen, and we see that the response is very positive, and the discourse inside of Ukraine, I would say, shifted from being a climate friendly, environment friendly country that is sending the resources like hydrogen or biofuel or like whatever to Europe and earning money into a domestic aspect, because currently a lot of people are thinking that like we need this biomethane, biogas, hydrogen, green energy inside Ukraine. We need to restore our cities that have been destroyed with the best energy efficient technology. I guess Valery Bezos would sell more from the energy efficiency agents. We need to plan our cities to rebuild them with a new, heat facilities that will heat the waste, that will heat the leftover from the agriculture production. So it's about a new way to think on Ukraine. And also, I bet the colleagues from DTEC and from Metinvest who are, really care about Mariupol, and we all like really, the heart is breaking. And I was born in Mariupol, basically in this maternity house that had been shelled. And in my table, I have this symbol of Mariupol, which is a tripod, basically. How to show it? Yeah, this is a tripod that recently used in the port for the ship, and then it became the symbol is an big anti-tank tripod. So the Mariupol and the metallurgy there, like which is used in 19th century old-day technology, they need to be, and it's destroyed. You don't need to rebuild this with the same technology. You need to rebuild it with the hydrogen one. And it will be from, nuclear power station or from the green energy, the chemical production, so basically the fertilizers, which consume huge amount of gas, which should also be switched to hydrogen and many other innovative technology. And this will lead, as my colleagues previously said, to the not only energy independence of Ukraine, but it will result that we will ship the green, clean, and reliable energy to Europe, which will help to substitute Russian energy. So instead of just framing this as climate, environment, or something, like it's now switching to the Russian energy. And we yesterday had a high-level conversation with the German Chancellery and with the German Ministry of Economy and Climate, and they confirm our suggestions that Germany will invest more even to renewable, which will not only help them to fulfill their climate targets, which is still super actual in Europe, which is not yet in Ukraine prior to war, but Europe and states are still speaking about green development. But this now have another aspect. Green energy will help to shift from Russian fossil fuel, and Ukraine should stick to this part also. And we in Naftogaz have a huge ambition to become the leader of this process. And we, even during the war, doing a huge amount of activity. Of course, you cannot do construction something, it's difficult, and we are realists, but a lot of preparatory work, financial analysis, a lot of engineering, etc. This is what we are currently engaged. And I do suppose I answer the question from a notable gentleman and send a strong signal to the audience. Yes, it's war. We are realistic. It's hard to speak about green or like any reconstruction, but it's not only in Naftogaz. People all over Ukraine are thinking of how to reconstruct Ukraine. We have 4 different plans of green recovery of Ukraine, or just a recovery plan for Ukraine from the office of president, from prime minister, from prime minister advisor, from independent think tanks, and they are all saying about this. So it's not only Naftogaz or mayors or businessmen, it's the world who know that the energy shift will be green. But maybe to my final comment, although I love green topic very much, I guess the most that we need is investment into the gas extraction in Ukraine, which will help, and it will be the revenue for our green development, because we cannot only rely on Western aid. We cannot only rely on the reparation from Russia. We should also rely on ourselves, and the only revenues that we can have is our gas reserves, that is like one of the biggest in Europe, and we need to intensify this direction also, and like even to prioritize. Thank you for your beautiful discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Rabchin, for making a valuable contribution to this discussion. And just as in your opening speech, your closing remarks were marked with not only the analysis, but also outlining the ways forward. Now we would like to hear closing remarks from Michael Grossman. If you're still with us, Mr. Grossman. Probably not. Andriy Kulykov.
Just a couple of sentences about unstudied lessons. In 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and unleashed the war in Donbass, on December 1st, actually, Russia and European Union stopped the project of South Stream, which had to be a new one pipeline bypassing Ukraine. In early 2015, European Union published a document called like a framework strategy on European Union energy security, and the document was about there were so many positions and points that we hear today from the European Union, like joint purchases of Russian gas, that cooperation with Russia will be held only from the perspective of security, etc., etc. But in September 2016, we saw a deal signed on Nord Stream 2 construction, and later we saw start of construction of Turk Stream. So 1.5 years passed since all events that shocked European Union, the whole world. I mean, Russian annexation of Crimea and started the war. And 1.5 years later, Europeans just decided to make business as usual. And here I'd like to quote Turkish President Erdogan, who said, if sanctions were much more tough 8 years ago, we wouldn't see the situation which is in Ukraine today. So now it is time to fix the mistakes which were made in the recent decade. Now it's time to fix the problem of Russian aggression and deep Europeans' energy dependence on Russia. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kulykov. Not only to rectify the past mistakes, but also not to allow for new ones. And your contribution to this may be paramount. Wojciech Jakubik, go ahead, please.
So I would be brief because from my point of view, and I believe it is a point of view of multiple energy analysts in Western Europe, we need to underline this need of limiting our prosperity for the common good of fighting Russian imperialism in Europe. So it won't be easy. It will be a tough job, not only in Ukraine, but also inside European Union, because we'll need to limit ourselves. According to International Energy Agency, if we only limit the heating next winter for 1 Celsius degrees, we would decrease the dependence on gas for 10 billion cubic meters a year. It's a lot, because that's exactly the amount of natural gas coming from Russia to Poland until the Yamal contract is over this year, or until we enter the European embargo on Russian gas, hopefully. So we can do that. We need to invest in it as we invested in security capacity, as we've invested in security of supply capacity in Central and Eastern Europe. So it's also an investment, and I would connect the military, the political and economic arguments all together, because the goal is clear. The path will be tough, but the result is really in a grasp of our hand. But we need to make decisive actions now, not tomorrow or in a month.
Thank you, Mr. Kubik. In your desire to connect things, we see again manifestation of the comprehensiveness of your picture. So thank you for this very much. And who else to better sum up the entire discussion than Mr. Valery Bezus? He's the head of the State Agency on Energy Efficiency of Ukraine and Vice President of Energy Club. Mr. Bezus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andriy. Many thanks for all of colleagues for such a firm discussion. It feels like we are mostly on the same page. It's a good start for further development of our discussion. I think that talking about the sanctions, we should keep in mind the purpose of such sanctions. We should think in mind it clearly. That I believe that we need not only to defeat the evil, but we need to provide further development by opening new opportunities and making our win sustainable. Yes, talking about opportunities is very important when we pragmatically talk about sanctions, because sanctions are a double-edged issue, and we need to give some perspectives to our partners. And such a perspective as a mutual development of the Ukrainian energy sector as an important part of the the whole European energy sector looks quite sound from our point of view. And today I have the honor to announce a new initiative of the Energy Club to establish a special fund to support the restoration of the Ukrainian energy sector, its further rehabilitation and modernization. The core idea behind this fund, between all of the funds which are already established and of course will be established, is to provide the best and the most sustainable practices from the point of view of sustainable business models and sustainable opportunities for the further development of the sector. It's important, it's hugely important to clearly see that we are facing not only a lot of issues with hardware, with those harms and disruptions, but we have a lot of issues such as technical regulations and policies and law frameworks. So we have a huge framework of work to do to provide business with opportunities to provide sound models for public-private partnerships, because without such models, sustainable restoration, sustainable rehabilitation, modernization of the energy sector is quite impossible. So we are quite deep into this theme, and on the 31st of May, the Energy Club will conduct the special event, the special meeting, when we will have the opportunity to discuss the process of further restoration and further movement in our energy sector with donors and investors more in a more specific way. So thank you very much for this sound start of our movement. Looking forward for the further discussions, further exact actions, and further business and public activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bezus, for this apt conclusion on the very interesting and promising discussion. You said that we are, or rather the participants are, more or less on the same page. Yes, the impression is like this, and we should remember that this is a page which is not yet in a final chapter. So there's a lot of work ahead, and what you have said today is pointing us, I think, in the direction which may be efficient, effective, and affect those whom this should affect. Thank you all for taking part in the Energy Freedom, and this will be published on the Energy Freedom site, Energy Club site, of course. God protect you, glory to Ukraine. Let's live and win. Bye-bye.